back to Beyond the Ballot. Our voice, our choice. Beyond the Ballot is a series created to educate Black voters about their rights and to give them all of the information they need to be an informed voter about Issue 1 here in Ohio. On this episode, we have Diandra. Diandra got together a group of community members to talk about all the myths and misconceptions they've been hearing related to reproductive justice and all that we need to know about Issue 1 and how we can become a more informed voter on November 7th. Let's see what they're talking about.
We're here to talk about Issue 1, reproductive justice, Black women, rights, power, all of those things, okay? So I just want to start off, what do you all know about Issue 1?
It is for reproductive justice as far as like having a voice, your choice for your body.
You said it.
This gives you a choice. It gives you a choice. That's the biggest thing, is having a choice.
And having your own autonomy for your body as well.
Not only what you want for yourself, but it's understanding that it is such an intimate and so an issue that is have to be left to each depending on their circumstances. We cannot tell people what to do with those things. There is not one for all. Everyone is unique and everyone has a right to choose depending on their circumstances.
Yes.
And this is if we vote yes on Issue 1, just to clarify, the supporting Issue 1 is what you are talking about and keeping your voice, your choice. And so we're all here as community leaders, community participants. What are some of the primary obstacles you've heard community members express when it comes to voting and supporting Issue 1?
Not really understanding it. I've heard that a lot of people don't really understand the language or what does it actually mean. And then you have conflicting advertisements and different groups coming out saying things on either side. And so there are a lot of people who just have questions about what is it? What am I actually voting for? Does that mean that my 8-year-old can go and have an abortion and not tell me, like things like that? So
I think a lot of it too is so it was such a big push for vote no on Issue 1 at one point that a lot of the old signage is still up and a lot of the old that information is still up. So people are confused, especially where I am. They're confused on should I be voting no or yes. And so just to explain why it should be yes and just doing that switch has been kind of the battle, honestly.
So education is a big piece.
As a community leader dealing with LEPs, limited English proficiency people, it's already hard for someone who speaks English to understand the issues. And when we're dealing with people that have a limited proficiency in English, it's even harder. When we went out in August, because of all those obstacles that were put before us, we didn't want to make it any more confusing. It's just about voting no, because if you don't vote no, they're gonna have a say-so. You will never be able to choose, even if you have to die, because in those states that have adopted restrictive bans, you have to be dying to have an abortion. There is no special circumstances. And the fact that in Ohio we have our governor, who is the authority we have voted to put ahead to represent all of us, lying, these misleading things he was talking about, and he's like, oh, you won't have. It's just, we are up against those things because he's an expert. When Frank LaRose come and say, this is what it is, I'm just a layman. They're like, it's going to be confusing. We came to ask them to vote no in August, and this is done. So much obstacles, really, 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 in the same year, having us tell people vote just no. They vote no. We come back a month later to work on a yes. It has been very, very confusing, like she was saying. And
I would say the same as well. Like, people are confused because it was no, not too long ago. Now it's yes. And some people feel like also that does their vote even matter? So, and just not knowing, the lack of education to say like, okay, you voted no, then now you gotta vote yes now. People are like, so is my vote gonna even matter? But that's what I've been hearing.
So the biggest concern that I've heard voiced is whether or not that means minors would be able to get an abortion without parental consent. There's a lot of people that are concerned about that because there's not really a lot of education out there about the issue, and what you see on the media, like was said before, is very conflicting, and so you're not sure, and so that's like a huge concern I've heard people voice.
How can we address and debunk some of these myths or misinformation? So you talked about authority in the government, such as the governor giving information that can be conflicting, confusing, or just not being educated on what actually is in the bill. And then also being confused with, I say, strategic in terms of voting no initially and now voting yes. What are some things that we can do in your experience to address and debunk these myths?
Go to see people where they are at, and talk to religious leaders, because churches, mosques, synagogues, they are told that we're trying to kill lives. And it's not about killing. Like in my religion, we have Yaqeen. It's one of the biggest Muslim. They're based in New York. They give us guidelines. Yaqeen has stated that there should be a choice. There is no compulsion in a religion. We live in a society where we shouldn't be guided by our religions because it's something that belongs to everybody. So everyone, it's between you and whatever you believe in. Those are such intimate decisions. So I believe that this can help, that can help because there have been misinterpretation from religious leaders. And America is a profoundly religious society. Religion is woven in the fabric of society, and those religious leaders are telling people, because we want to kill people, we're against life. Pro-lifer has done so much damage using mixed messages against those who want freedom. Freedom means everyone is able to do what suits their individual situation. It doesn't mean anything more than that. But so we have to be more engaged, put more people out there, everywhere.
I think something that you said was really interesting. You said that you mentioned that it was strategic, and it is strategic. And I think that in addition to meeting people where they are, there's a lack of education. There's also a lack of health education there too. So as we know, we live here in Ohio and we see what they're trying to do with health education or sex education in schools and all the other things that they're trying to take out and trying to pull, and that's all by design. But when you can empower a society to make their own choices, you also are giving them education as well. So I think those two things have to go hand in hand. There's no way to reach someone if you can't give them the education, and also too with meeting them exactly where they are.
I would have to say like accessibility. I work with a lot of older people around me, and just them even knowing that there's anything to vote about, they just don't know because they may not have the most up-to-date phones, they may not be up-to-date in their emails or whatnot because there's no reason, they're retired. So there's no reason for them to like kind of look out beyond what's in front of their front yard and everything. So accessibility is definitely a key because a lot of them don't drive and a lot of them don't have the means of transportation just to get there, and some of their driver's licenses are expired. So they're making it even harder for people to vote because you can't, now they've updated like the state ID and that you can use, but there's so many restrictions. It can't be old. You have to be at this current address, and then whatever you say at the polls, they have to take your word for it, because if you say, oh wait, I don't live there anymore, it doesn't matter. Now you have to be an absentee vote and everything. So they're just making it harder for people to actually vote.
I would say social media is a way that you could also reach people, like especially if you're meeting people where there are like maybe teenagers like 18, 19, 20, that's where you will find a lot of people on social media. Also maybe going to the schools, like if they're seniors there that are 18, or just like events where you know that younger people will be, but I mean also focusing on all the different age groups. But sometimes the younger generation really don't feel like that their voice is going to be heard sometimes, so they just don't go to vote at all, or they don't even know what you're talking about when you ask them about these issues. And then sometimes people think like, well, it's not the primary election, but all the elections matter. Yes. So it might not, sometimes if you don't see change right away, people are like, oh no, well, I'm not voting. Well, you got to think it wasn't overnight that this happened, so it's going to take time. So.
Children, it's up to us to very young talk to them about those issues, teach them that their bodies is there and they can make any choice, and we have to be there with them. Whatever they choose to do, we're not going to tell them like we do most of the time, this is the way it is. We have to shift in order to help this awareness. We can't be doing it in the community and going home and not working. Everything starts at home, and we are in charge of this community. This white supremacy thing is not just those institutions they have put, but the way they, it's almost they molded us into believing that our vote doesn't make a difference. We have to reclaim our stories, re-own them, tell it in our own voices. This is who we are. And in August, there was a hope. We were all out there, and we have to keep the momentum going. Every day work for it.
So what are some ways that we can practically engage community members? So like we're having this conversation now, I think that's a way. Are there some other ways that you all know of or are doing that can engage people on supporting issue 1?
Starting conversations wherever you're at. I mean, when you're standing in line in the store, instead of asking someone, how's the weather? Isn't it nice outside today? You can bring up like, hey, what do you know about issue 1? And just start the conversation there, because if you can engage them and it's interesting enough to them and you can educate them on what they need to know, then they'll start that conversation with other people and it will just keep spreading. So I think it's important to just speak up and speak out whenever you have the opportunity to do so.
Also, call out misinformation when you see it. Don't just let it sit there. Don't let it fester. Don't let those ideas continue to just have life. Like if you hear someone saying, oh, well, yeah, I heard that issue 1 is gonna let people have alien babies. Like, no, that's not it. That's not even in there. Like, bro, we're not even doing that. So you have to be able to call it out and also be willing to stand in your stance about it too. Be unwavering in your opinion, be unwavering in your information, especially if you know you have the right information. And don't be afraid to say, you know what, I know this is what you heard, but actually let me tell you what actually is here. And then give a resource too. So even if you don't believe me, you can go and look at it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like that's hard for people to have those uncomfortable conversations because they don't think like, okay, well, what if they react this way? But sometimes you really can't worry about how they're going to react, and if you can give them a resource to kind of back up what you're saying, then they don't have to just depend on what you're saying. They can go look it up themselves, and then you can kind of go from there. I feel like also maybe at work sometimes they can open up these conversations, because sometimes it's not something that they're comfortable with discussing at work either, but you have to start having these conversations in order to create the change that we're looking to create.
At Motherful, we're doing, community discussions about this, and organizations like that, like Zora's House, Motherful, those organizations can be used because they're pro-reproductive, and all the members, like at Motherful, we know that our members, they are for reproductive rights. We are a reproductive rights organization. We have about 500 members. If they talk to their families, we have to work with organizations like that have members, families, everybody goes to Zora's house. We can print out things, take it there. This is maybe going too far, but when I work on issues, I do translations. I'm a certified translator to get it to those communities, because it's a wasted vote for us. Nobody reach out to those communities.
I think what you said is really important, and I think it lends to the broader idea that the personal is always political, right? So you have to also explain to people, how does this affect me? Yes, we're talking about women here, we're talking about people who can have babies, but also at the same time, how does it affect the men in our society too? Because this also affects them, and I don't think that messaging is always translated. Sometimes things get pigeonholed as just this group's issue, when honestly, yes, that group's issue too, but as a community, it's far reaching and it's far spreading. So you also can talk to people, explain to people that way, meet people where they are that way, by explaining, okay, if this doesn't pass, all of these things can happen. Then how does that further leave our community? What does that look like? How does that show up in your life? And you'll see a reaction out of people.
Yeah. You have to make that connection. You have to make that connection with them where they can understand how it can affect their lives. And I think they're more open to listening then.
Yeah, I always talk about when it comes to convincing someone, or even just connecting with someone, it's like, what's their value proposition? How are they invested in this? How will this affect them? And then meet them, like you're saying, meet them where they are. It's because people value home, people value their community. So if we want to bring something to them, we have to go to where they are. And that's physically, but also emotionally or spiritually or politically. So when we're talking about meeting people where they are, or marginalized communities as well, how can we ensure that marginalized communities know about issue 1? How can we make sure that they know how they can have their voices heard or their needs met, especially when we're talking about this confusion when it comes to vote no, vote yes, vote yes, wait, issue 1. So how can we reach those marginalized communities so they understand how this affects them, but also how they can get their needs met in this fight, honestly?
I think you got to be present. You really have to show up. You have to go to the people and not wait for the people to come to you. So, like the example, you hear somebody, you can start talking about it in the grocery store. You know that there's maybe, y'all play spades every Thursday or something like that. Talk to your people about it. Even when it comes down to, I know that schools get kind of weird and kind of murky, so I understand that there's a time and a place, but even just talking to your friends about it, like talking to your family, like we said, talking to your community members, but then also letting them know too, hey, if you have questions, there are actually governing bodies here where you can go and talk to it. We do have a city council. Like, you can go and speak at the State House. Like, they're empowering people by giving them choices and giving them options to, if I do have a question, can I go to somebody, or even offering yourself as a resource, because you can tell people where to go, but people more than likely are going to come back to you because you're the one who told them about it. So you have to offer being a resource as well.
Yeah. And going in the communities, like sometimes people don't go into the certain communities, but if you don't go into the communities, how do they know? How do you educate them? And then if you have like pamphlets, maybe you got from different organizations that kind of represents what it is that it talks about as for issue 1, that can kind of help them out if they have questions. And if you know, you can answer them. If you don't, you can direct them to the people that do know. The rec centers in the communities, there's a lot of kids and parents that go to those rec centers, and sometimes there's no pamphlets. When I go in rec centers, sometimes I see nothing about voting in there. So if you have them posted up, people a lot of times stop and read those posters that are posted up, so you would be surprised.
I think besides going into the community, also using your platform that you have. So if you do have a reach in social media, I feel like that's a wonderful place to start, because if people are always seeking you, just like in their downtime, you have a voice that people are willing to listen to you on. I mean, for me, it's just a quick post and people are able to see it, and I get people interacting with it. I ask people to interact with those posts, so that way I know, okay, at least it's out there. as for the people around me, my neighbors, the community that I'm involved with, just making sure, saying goodbye, hey, don't forget to vote, and then just keep on going and everything. But, I've had where my neighbor is like, what are you talking about? What, vote for what? And I'm like, I'm glad you asked. You have a second? And then I would just talk to her about it and everything. And she was like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm gonna vote, the way she wants to vote and everything. But I think it's important that we use our voices where we're strongest at as well.
I think if you have a position in the community where you have access to like large groups of people, take advantage of your ability to influence and educate like every second that you have, because once you start speaking, the word spreads and people listen, and especially if there's a rotation and you're always around different groups of people. If you speak up every time, like you're reaching masses without even knowing it.
And the opposition's gonna do it. The opposing side is gonna spend so much energy, so much time, so much money trying to combat what they don't want to pass. So it's almost like you have to keep that same energy. You don't have to necessarily do some of the mudslingers, some of the, the disrespectful things that they do, but you do have to show up and match that energy. So yeah, y'all gonna run 5 commercials in an hour talking about vote no issue 2 or issue 1, then yes, we're gonna spend 10. We're gonna spend money on 10 commercials for that hour, telling people why they should vote yes. So,
and these city halls we're doing here, we'll call them city halls, okay, we're doing here are very important, but they shouldn't be limited only when people are voting, because people have to be prepared way ahead. We do this, it's over. Everyone who participated in this series have to be prepared, having pamphlets, yard signs everywhere. I'm marked, I'm in this, wherever I go, I have to take it with me. I have become part of it. We have to have circles, monthly circles. Like so many people, I encounter people. I work at the courthouse. We actually work together. A lot of people, when I talk to them about, I can't vote, I was in jail. They don't know. They can vote. But everyone's been telling them that once you start telling them they can, really, they don't know they can't vote. They can vote. I have to bring my ID with my current address, like she said. And those are little things we have to engage in at all time, not only when we're doing elections. Those grants, they have to keep coming. They don't come just when elections are happening, because those circles, like, I don't know if you're all familiar with Lean. It's circles people do every month. I do something similar depending on the things I do. And I love libraries because you don't have to pay. I bring a little bit of food. It's to fight social isolation. But when I bring people together, I tell them about what I like, and they don't even feel like they're pressured all year, all the time. And you have to keep doing those. For years, I've been doing this. When something happens I'm interested in, I know they're gonna come. I know they're not coming for this. It's very important to stay engaged with people. They know you there. And if it wasn't a matter of principle, you wouldn't be doing this year after year, election after election. Last year, I'm offering, if I can get 10 people to come vote, I'm cooking for 10 people. The day of election, we did 30 people. There was a church. They do a lot of social, I love sanctuary, Pastor Rich, they do. And they're always engaged on this. I do a lot of work with them. So I said, if you can have 30 people, I have 30 meals. It's, they come and then they keep coming. Now you know them, they know you. It's not, this shouldn't be something we're doing just when we have elections, because this is our everyday lives. If we can't change it, if we don't make Ohio less hostile for us. Ohio is very hostile for us, and this is our land, this is our state. We have to stay firm, we have to stay in our ground, and it's hard. It becomes every single day there is something new. And next year we're gonna have something. That issue was here in August, right? it has came back again. And we won in August. That's why when I went to see people, they're like, I thought this was over. I said, no, it is never over, because they will never give up. They have means. They want to be their voice to be the only voice heard. We have voices. They have a voice, we have voices. And we have to tell our own stories.
So what I'm hearing is that this needs to be a constant conversation. This just can't be when we have a larger issue on the ballot, but this has to be a part of our everyday lives. This has to be like education. It needs to be a part of how we breathe. If we talk about everything else, we need to continue to talk about this. And so I want to bring up one point. Can you just highlight your earrings? I don't know if anybody's seen that. Just go ahead and highlight. Can you? So I feel like that is one way for us to kind of start a conversation. So you talked about, talking to someone at the grocery store, but little things that make us beautiful Black women like we are very expressive often and creative people. But statement pieces like earrings, like I don't know if you all can see them, but they're, so I want to call it a vagina. Do you call it something? Vulvas. Okay, I was like, I feel like it's more specific than that. Thank you. Okay, so they're vulvas and they're painted in gold. That's just wonderful. But things like that, especially when we're talking about reproductive justice, can be a conversation starter. Or t-shirts, or different things that make us can start a conversation, can elicit creativity, but inquisitiveness as well. And so I think those are some of the ways that we can engage each other in these conversations and talking about things like issue 1. Okay, so the next question that I want to talk about is, can community organizations implement specific strategies or initiatives to encourage voter registration and turnout, particularly among those who may be less politically engaged? So we talk about how you meet, you said monthly? Mm-hmm.
No, it's mine. That's my own thing. It's every other month. Sometimes
every other month.
Even
okay. Well,
yeah.
I think that counts. So you engage people every other month. You talked about other organizations such as Zora's House, which I think we're all familiar and connected with here. And so what are some other ways that community organizations can implement specific strategies and get those people who are not typically engaged?
I am a matriarch with Mother 4. We have like 10, 15 matriarchs. We're doing it all the time.
Can you explain that to us? What's a
Mother 4 is
yes.
a co-op of single mothers. We support single mothers. We have a pantry. We support mothers with emergency funds. We help them like set up their businesses, give them resources. We do every 90 days some swap, a big swap, so people can come and have new clothes, new everything. It's basically whatever you need as a single mother for you and your children. So we work with organizations. I think we are working with this organization also. So we're there all the time, all year. We have a pantry. Fun Day, it's open for everyone. Whenever they come, we have to keep telling them about that. We have an app where we talk about issues, everything that is happening pertaining to what we like, we share. And those are things we can all do here. I'm linked with Zara's House, it's the same thing. Those are spaces we own. We have to start with those spaces we already own and do more linkage between us, because the weight of this society lies on us. It's so hostile, and this work help also alleviate a little bit the weight of patriarchy. This society is a male-dominated society where it's just the burden is too heavy. We have to work in collaboration.
I was gonna say, you also have to meet people where their needs are as well and eliminate the excuses. So a lot of times you'll hear people say they don't want to go vote because they don't have a ride, or the bus is gonna take me all the way from West Columbus to East Columbus or something like that, because even though they may be staying in certain areas, that's not always where they're registered to vote. So you have to also eliminate those barriers. So instead of being like, oh, well, you can't go, oh, well, that sucks. Okay, I'll give you a ride. Okay, you don't know anything about the issue. Okay, let's get in the car. I'm gonna tell you about the issue. I'm gonna show you some things. I'm gonna go vote too, you should come with me, like doing those type of things. So then that way you don't have people, you don't let them sit with the excuse, you empower them.
For me, I had worked the voting polls in August, and because I saw how crazy hard it was for people just to vote at a location, I just put on my story like, hey, DM me your address so I can see exactly where you need to go to vote and tell you exactly what you need. So that way there's no excuse on why you can't vote at your correct location, because I had access to it. It's just they didn't know that if they got there and they just said, yeah, it'll be an absentee vote, but if you're in your wrong district, that vote doesn't count. So it didn't matter. So that's why I was offering those services. But I feel like community organizations could also offer that, because I mean, it is just public information, but not everybody has access to that.
The fact also, like, they are putting more obstacles every time. You know, they changed the zoning at the last minute last time because we weren't attentive. People waited until the day of the vote. I'm not here. We have to be there at all time. We have to be attentive so we can tell them, hey, things have changed. You need to do this. So we kind of need a resource book or something we could all use, because taking people to polls, there is a resource for that. They have just to call that phone number. For the longest, I didn't know. So we were carpooling, and you know, there is somewhere you can call. I have people. So all of this, we need just to put it together, and it's a work we need to do ahead, not wait until elections come.
Yeah, I think this was a constant conversation. Then we can be intentional about meeting the needs or the barriers of people for voting. So, or knowing, so we talk about, I know a lot of people talk about when the deadline to register to vote is, but what is the deadline to change your address? Or when the zoning's changed, hey, let's do a massive community conversation, meal, whatever we need to do. Food gets us outside. Whatever we need to do so that you know where you're registered and if you're in the same polling location. So like for me, I got a new polling location. Actually, it changed in August, and then I just got another notification. It changed again.
Yep.
And so, but they had redid the zoning in August, and that was a new location for me. And so when I got there, they told me my name wasn't on the list. And I'm like, listen, honey, I've been in this house for 10 years. My name's on that list. And so, and it was on that list, but, you know, just standing, and I don't think they were trying to be funny or anything. I don't know, honestly. But it was me like, no, just keep turning the page and keep looking. And then it's like, okay, well, can I see the book? Because I know how to find my name faster than you do. So it's really like standing, I don't want to use the term standing your ground because it can mean something else in the political world. But it really takes you advocating for yourself, using your voice. And if you know that your name should be on that paper, then you keep looking or go ask to pass it to yourself so you can look for yourself. But having these conversations in times when it's not just election season, so we can understand that using our voice and being active and separating, I think we have a connotation when it comes to the political world, and it's like, no, this is your world. This is where you belong. Just like you said, this is the spaces that we own. Yeah, it affects you. So how can we be intentional about making sure that we know that this is a space that we also own, because you have a vote and you have a voice. Are there some other ways that anybody else wanted to bring up in terms of community organizations and what we can do to intentionally talk to marginalized people? Bring them into the fold?
After school programs in those high schools, because like she said, we can't do it in schools anymore, but we can get in touch with the schools and let them know we're helping them. Like I live in Linden, I've been helping young men, because my sons are men, she's younger, with politics and civics, because they have to pass that for their graduation. So I'm just helping them with that. But you ask them, they don't know what's happening. A lot of them don't vote, and this is an opportunity. We have to be engaged everywhere, even one time. And those young people, it's a wasted vote. They just don't know, and parents have to be at the forefront. We don't just need them to help make sure they're fed, they're sleeping, but we have to awaken this conscience on them. This is your country, this is your voice, because it's not possible elsewhere, it's possible in this country. You vote count. It matters. No matter how many obstacles they can put in front of you, if we are one, we have the same clear message, we will win.
So how else can we empower people to actually vote on reproductive justice? How can we give them agency to use their voice?
I would say, like Antoinette was saying with the social media, like TikTok, like that's a fun space where you can kind of make it fun where it doesn't have to be so serious, because if they are young people, like they like to engage in like the fun stuff. They don't want it to be serious all the time. So if you can kind of make it fun, and it's literally a little snippet that you make on there, and that's most of the time, you know, they go on there for a lot of different things. So if that can catch their attention and they're scrolling and then they come back like, oh, this is interesting, they're educated in that little snippet there. So
I was gonna agree with you. Like TikTok is really, really huge, especially being a business owner. It's like you have to be willing to adjust. You have to understand that your community or your market, if you want to look at it that way, they're not picking up a newspaper. They're not watching the news at 5 and 6 o'clock anymore. Like, they're not even going to Facebook to go to the news pages. They don't even have Facebook. They don't even want to deal with Facebook. So, like, I saw something really interesting last year during the education that they were doing around Roe v. Wade, and before it was overturned, the Dobbs decision was made a decision. And what they did was they took like facts about sexual history and pregnancy and conception and all those things, and they made it into like a little trivia game. And they would go out and they would interview people like, do you know this? And then at the end, they would tell them, like, you know, give them the answers of how well they did. And then they will also end the whole clip with, if you want to know more, these are these resources. You can always follow us for this. So I think like a lot of what we've been saying tonight, which is so true, and there's so much power in that, is that you definitely have to meet people where they are. And you have to figure out the creative ways to meet where they are. Because not everybody's going to come to a town hall. Not everyone's going to come to someone at the library and hear you speak, especially these young kids. They don't want to do that. They want to have fun. So maybe you need to have, I don't know, an escape room or something like that. Or you got to go to TikTok, or you got to feed them. Like, you have to do something, and it has to be engaging as well.
I think like even hosting an event, something where there's music and food and just things that interest them. Like even with the social media, if there are other young people that are there speaking about the issues, then they would be more likely to listen than if we're talking about it. You know, if they can see people that look like them, that are dressed like them, that they can relate to, then they'll probably listen. If they're speaking their slang or whatever it is that, you know, gets them to engage and learn. Those are, I think, great ways to reach the younger population.
Like, we have a selfie studio here, and I just found out about it. Like, imagine if
Here, as in Columbus.
in Columbus.
Okay.
Imagine like if that selfie studio hosted a room, or like did a room where it was all about, like, I don't know, I'm spitballing here, but it could have been like all newspaper, but the newspaper articles could have been all the information about issue 1, and you go to that selfie studio, and if you take a picture in that room, you get discount off, or you get that picture for free or something like that. Just simple little things like that matter so much. And we're in Columbus too. This is a football town. This is a college football town. We don't utilize our resource here. I work at the university. I'm a Ohio State alumni as well. The one thing I didn't hear, or I haven't seen, even every day when I get up and go to work, I don't see people out there talking on High Street. High Street is public property. If the people who are against abortion can sit outside every day with those gruesome pictures that they love to put outside every day, I don't ever see anybody out there doing the education on the other side. It's like we're almost, with a sign.
And every day we see it downtown. It's been there for almost 5 years now. They're showing you fetuses, telling you. And there is also a need to redefine things. Like when people hear Planned Parenthood, they hear abortion. And we have to be able to tell them abortion is almost not done at Planned Parenthood. You know, it's nothing compared to but everyone hears abortion. And then what are reproductive health? We have to have, like, we started with that when she said, you ask her, and that should be coming like that. What are reproductive health? Just like that, because we hear so many things.
And reproductive health and reproductive justice just doesn't start with an abortion. That is not where it starts at. So if you actually understand that not everybody is having an abortion solely because they made a bad decision. Sometimes that's the only medical way that you can save yourself. So I think that we also have to reframe the conversations around, okay, because when people say, oh, you're just trying to kill a baby, but what if I'm also trying to save my life? So
when we're talking about the long-term benefits of supporting issue 1, reproductive justice, reproductive health, you brought up a good point in terms of sometimes it's about the health of the mother or the person carrying the baby at that time. What are some of the other long-term benefits? And then I'm going to double whammy this question. But what else can we do beyond this conversation? So what we're talking about here has long-term effects, especially this issue 1. It has long-term effects on reproductive justice and reproductive health. Long-term, beyond this table, beyond this conversation, what can we do? What are those effects? But then also, what can we do beyond here?
When she said, like, anti-abortion to reproductive, people equate abortion and reproductive justice. We have to reframe it. Abortion is when something is off. It's not something we're trying to do naturally, like she said. It's when something goes wrong, because we are mothers, we are women. You know, we nurture. Our first instinct is to protect. When we say we're choosing to end this, it's for a greater good. It's never for just a selfish reason. So that has to be clear.
Yeah. I would also say, just so people will understand, like, don't just focus on the abortion part, because a person should be able to implement when they're going to create a family. And if it's not right and they're going to bring the child into the world and it's going to be even more in a chaotic situation, they should have a say-so in that. Or even if they are, maybe it's an emergency, so you telling me that they just have to sit there and plan between saving their life or saving the child's life, like, they should be able to have a say-so in that. So just, again, educating is the number one key. I would say is people just need to be educated.
And so
I was gonna say, I think we also have to be aware of our position. Like, we are community leaders discussing this, but you also have people who are not in the same position, who do not have the amount of education, or who do not have access to get that type of education. So I think that we also, as a community, have to realize that not everyone is coming in with the same amount of knowledge, but also too, I'm a sex educator, so I do believe that it comes back to people actually knowing what their options are, what their choices may be, even what might be happening to them. Just because someone is engaging in a practice or engaging in sex and creating a life does not mean that they always fully understand what's happening. And we talk about it from positions of, well, everybody should know what they're doing, but that's not always the case. So we have to realize that we're dealing with people who have a range of knowledge on the subject. So that way, we always have to have someone engaging them at every step of the way.
And make it a comfortable conversation. Sometimes it's not always comfortable to have a conversation about a sex conversation. So make them comfortable to be able to express the knowledge that they do know, and don't make them feel less than if they don't know. Like, they should know, because like she said, everybody doesn't know. And if we have the knowledge to give to them, why not give it to them?
And so I did a little research on issue 1, and I think one of the things that we don't talk about when we talk about reproductive health and reproductive freedom, often we relate that just to people having sex and the conception of a child, but that also relates to family planning. And so if you want to be on birth control, how you access birth control or any of that. And then some people also still relate birth control to sex, but that also has to do just with women's health. So like my first introduction to birth control had nothing to do with sex. It just had to do with regulating my menstrual cycle. And so really looking at the complexity of reproductive health and reproductive freedom goes beyond, like you said, relating it to abortion or relating it to
it's
terminating
about
a
well-being
life or anything like that. It's really about
the well-being
your
of this whole society.
Right.
Because if we space like family planning, when you say when we space, the children have a chance to thrive, to grow before someone else is brought, and to share their resources. It's a matter of creating a more, harmonious families and society.
And reproductive health has nothing to do with religion. Even though there are some indoctrinations there with different religious societies, I think we really have to pull apart health and religion, because there are some things that religion cannot actually overpower, cannot dictate in your life. This might be controversial to say, but if you're in a situation where you're literally, like I can share, I literally had a blood vessel that was between my uterine wall and the baby that was trying to implant. If that baby would have implanted, that vessel would have broken and I would have bled out and I would have died. At that moment in time, even though there is a source of faith and spirituality in my life, I had to think about, okay, am I gonna let that dictate whether I can be here for the 2 kids that I already have? Is that gonna dictate whether I'm gonna sit here and bleed a terrible and painful death just simply because I'm choosing to terminate a life or a child that I in turn did want or may not have wanted? So I think that we also have to have those real conversations that are uncomfortable, but also kind of look at it from a very human aspect of, hey, if this is about your life, what do we choose? Which life do we value? And I know that those conversations are very, very hard to have, but they're very, very important to have as well. Whichever side you decide that you land on, you need to have that conversation, having the open space to have that conversation. And as a community, we can do better about making those spaces safe and comfortable as well.
So our time is about complete together right now. But I want to make sure and just, open the table of conversation. Does anyone want to add anything else to the conversation before we depart this current space? Of course, this conversation does not have to stop here, should not stop here. And I'm going to go ahead and say will not stop here. So is there anything else that you all would like to put forth?
I know we spoke a lot about educating younger people, but I think it starts with the family. Because how people look at abortion and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, or what abortion actually is, as far as sexual health and reproductive justice and health goes, that starts at home. That's usually something that's embedded to you by your grandmother, your mother, people that really were never educated on those issues. And they just looked at abortion being a source of birth control. And a lot of people have used abortion as a source of birth control. And I think that's why there's such a stigma behind it. And so it has to start at all ages, like the 80-year-olds, the 70-year-olds and on down, because those are the ones that influence the younger generation.
I would just say before we end and everything is that this table is full of community leaders, and that I feel that it is important that community leaders, that we stand up and we're able to really continue the work after all of this, because it is a lot of work and it is starting at the family, and because there are a lot of old ideas or patriarchal ideas of what this actually means, and breaking those down and debunking those myths and everything. And I think it is our job as community leaders to actually do that type of work. And it is uncomfortable and it is tiring and it's thankless at times, but it is important that we do continue to show up for our people.
And because America is so tied up with religion, it's truly woven in the fabric of who we are. It's not a religion thing. Religion isn't telling you if you abort, and if you abort, it's bad. That guilt has to go. Religion wants us to be well for our family. If abortion is a solution to save that family, it's permissible, and people have to reinterpret what they were told about religion. A lot of things in those religions really have nothing to do with religion, and that's work we as community leaders have to do, to reconcile ourselves with our religions. It's those.
Like you said too, this conversation does have to go beyond this table, and we also have to understand that people know when you're just pandering to them. People know when it's fake. So if we want people to come out to vote, we want people to come out and get educated about these issues, we have to keep this going. There's no way that we could stop now, especially at the time in which we're at here in our state. We're at a very, very pivotal point here, where if things don't go a certain way, or we start losing freedoms in a certain way, then it's gonna be bad for everybody out here. And so we have to understand that, but we also have to continue to keep showing up. If it's December 7th, we still need to be having this conversation. February 18th next year, we still need to be having this conversation. April 23rd, which is the most random day ever, we still need to be having this conversation. It has to continue. And then bring a friend. Like, there are ways to educate that are not like this. Every single time my business has an event, it doesn't on paper seem like it's an event about sexual education or sexual health at all. But I always throw it in there because you're always going to leave me with something. You're always going to leave from me with something. So we have to keep doing this.
So just to piggyback, I just say our voices do matter, and together we are better. So it shouldn't stop here. So if everyone knows that, speak up, go vote, educate. We are better together. It makes a difference.
So we just came to remind you to vote yes on issue 1. All right, ladies, let's go. Vote yes on issue 1. November 7th, be there. Vote yes on issue 1.